Gay fire.
Sige,
Okay ra na kan? Silvano? Sige, good, good.
Sige, sige. So, ako.
Okay na.
So, good afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 8, and we are tasked to present on how to carry out maintenance, what are the tools needed, and the necessary precautions prior, during, and after the maintenance. So, I'm the first presenter, and my topic is piston overhaul of main propulsion engine. Next slide. So, before commencing the overhaul, first we must shut off the starting and off. Open the indicator cocks. Cool down the engine sufficiently to allow lubricating oil pumps to be shut down. Next is isolate fuel and cooling water. Next is work discussion. Toolbox meeting must be carried out to ensure that all participants read manuals, familiar with the procedure, safety precautions, and maker recommendations. Ensure that each person knows his task. Confirm required spares are on board. Check that lifting tools, straps, shackles, etc. are within certification and in good order. Next slide. Next is check the jacks are in good condition with no leaks. Ensure permission for immobilization is given. Carry out risk assessment. Ventilate crankcase and obtain permit to work. Ensure that no one else is working elsewhere on the engine and could be potentially harmed or harm others. Check out that no one is working in the vicinity of the shafting system and propeller, and that the bridge have confirmed that it is safe to turn the engine. Next. So here are the tools and materials needed. First is the PPE or protect, the safety shoes, hearing protection, boiler suit or other similar protective equipment, wrenches for the bolt, engine room crane for lifting the piston, grinder, screws, support tool, vernier caliper, ring expander, pliers, special tools, locking wire, lifting bracket, pressure testing tool, and guide ring. Next slide. So during the overhaul procedure, first is first is we must drain the cylinder cooling water from the respective cylinder. Note that it is advisable to just drain down the liner level in the case the liner is disturbed when lifting the piston. Remove cylinder head and associated pipework. Next is turn engine to BDC or bottom dead center and remove carbon and wear with from cylinder liner using a grinder. Next is unbolt the piston rod from the crosshead. Next is a two-piece spacer tube is bolted to the piston rod to protect the piston rod gland when lifting the piston. Next is unbolt the gland housing. The piston rod gland is removed with the piston rod. Next is turn the crank to TDC or top dead center. The spacer tube will push the piston gland out of its seating. Next is clean the threaded holes in the piston crown with a tap. Next is bolt on the lifting bracket. Next is the lift the piston rod and gland with engine crane and lower the assembly into the special grade cradle for maintenance. Next slide. Next slide. So next is once mounted in the cradle, the piston should be clean and all deposits removed. The piston rings are removed using the correct ring expanding tool. Inspect the ring grooves for wear on the bottom landing surface. A profile gauge is used to check the crown that does not burn excessively, which would thin and weaken it. If burning is excessive, the cause is often poor fuel injection. Investigate and replace the crown. The crown of the piston must be inspected carefully for evidence of cracking. Cracking is caused by excessive thermal stressing due to poor cooling and carbon buildup, or excessive mechanical stressing due to overloading. The contact faces of the rings and skirts are inspected for signs of abrasion and scuffing, which indicates poor filtration of fuel or air and poor cylinder lubrication. Excessive wear on the skirt may indicate misalignment or excessive clearance of crosshead guides. Piston rings should be gauged and a decision based on the manufacturer recommendations as to whether to replace them. It's like so the piston is disassembled from the rod and the cooling place is inspected once it reaches overhaul interval stated by Maker. On oil-cooled piston, look for buildup of carbon deposit, which could indicate overheating of the piston crown or contamination of heat oil caused by cylinder oil. On a water-cooled piston, look for evidence of a scale buildup due to incorrect after reassembly of the piston. Check that the cooling space is tight by applying a hydraulic test. If new rings are to be fitted, check the axial clearance in the ring grooves and circumfer- circumferential clearance by placing the ring into the unworn part of the cylinder liner. During the piston overhaul, the stuffing box normally overhauled as well. Segment must be inspected for wear, clearances, and springs to be measured according to the manual. Next slide. So next is clean and measured the and possibly overhauled piston with stuffing box inspected or overhauled is ready to be installed. Prior installing the piston, measure and record the liner wear. Apply rings guiding tool for insufficient cylinders oil when lowering the piston. Bolt the connecting rod to the crosshead, secure the stuffing box, install cylinder head and associated pipework, fill the cooling space with water and check for any leakages from the outside and inside of the engine. Start preheating the engine. Start the lube oil circulation. Pre-lubricate and turn the engine with the turning wheel. Next. So after overhauling, so we need to make sure that the bolts are tightened with torque wrench. Next is housekeeping to make sure that there will be no harm caused to others. Next is clean and return the tools. Next is after a test run, check for leaks and check for abnormal vibration. So that will be all.
So next to present is so next to present so next to present is Agent Cadet Torres.
Pre,
O ikaw na pre.
boss ano ang kuan ang procedure. Mo,
Sige na.
sige boss. So,
Sige.
piston overall of diesel engine. So what is overall? So overall is to completely renovate or making major changes in order to repair a few shutters and a new coat of paint won't come close to fixing that old boarded up house. It needs complete overhaul. So how to carry out the following maintenance. So first is to drain cylinder cooling water from the respected cylinder. Remove cylinder head and associated pipe work. Turn engine to BDC and remove carbon and wear ridge from cylinder lander using grinder. Unbolt the piston from the crosshead. A two-piece spacer tube is bolted to the piston rod foot to protect the piston rod gland with lifting the piston. Unbolt the gland housing the piston rod gland is removed with a piston rod. Turn the crank to TDC. The spacer tube will push the piston rod gland out of its seating. Clean out the threaded holes in the piston crown with a top. So the next step is to bolt on the lifting bracket. Lift the piston rod and gland with the engine crane and lower the assembly into the special cradle for maintenance. Once mounted in the cradle, the piston should be cleaned and all deposits removed. The piston rings are removed using the correct ring expanding tool. Inspect the ring grooves for wear to the bottom landing surface. A profile gauge is used to check that the crown has not burnt excessively, which would thin and weaken it. If the burning is excessive, the cause is often poor fuel injection. Investigate and replace the crown. The crown of the piston must be inspected very carefully of evidence of cracking. Cracking is caused by excessive thermal stressing due to poor cooling and carbon buildup, or excessive mechanical stressing due to overloading. The contact faces of the rings and the skirt are inspected for signs of abrasion and scuffing, which indicates poor filtration of fuel of air and poor cylinder lubrication. Excessive wear on the skirt may indicate misalignment or excessive clearance of crosshead guides. Piston rings should be gauged and a decision based on manufacturer's recommendations made as to whether to replace them. The piston is disassembled from the rod and the cooling spaces inspected once it reaches overall interval stated by maker. On oil-cooled pistons, look for buildup of carbon deposit, which could indicate overheating of the piston crown or contamination of feed oil by use of cylinder oil. After reassembly of the piston, check that the cooling space is tight by applying a hydraulic test. If new rings are to be fitted, check the extra clearance in the ring grooves and the circumferential clearance by placing the ring into a unworn part of the cylinder liner. So, during the piston overhaul, the stuffing box normally overhauled as well. Clean, measured, and possibly overhauled piston with stuffing box inspected or overhauled is ready to be installed. Prior installing the piston, measure and record the liner wear, apply rings, guiding tool, and sufficient cylinder oil when lowering the piston. Bolt the connecting rod, the crosshead, and secure the stuffing box and install the cylinder head and associated pipe work. Next. So, you fill the cooling space with water and check for any leakages from the outside and inside the engine. Start preheating the engine. Start allow circulation. Pre-lubricate and turn the engine with a turning gear. So, Engine Cadet Savillano will continue the report.
So thank you, Engine Cadet Torres. And good day, I'm Engine Cadet Sabiliano. So I'm continuing the report of Engine Cadet Torres. So mainly two kind of overhauling tools, testing tools and the servicing tool. To testing tools, the tools from a software testing context can be defined as a product that support one or more test activities right from planning, requirements, creating a build, test execution, defect logging, and test analysis. Servicing tools, the supply, installation, or maintenance of goods carried out by a dealer. Next. So the tools and materials to be used by piston overhauling. Service tools like nozzle cleaner, valve ring refacer, valve seat grinder, valve guide knurling tools, valve spring compressor, valve guide reamer, cylinder ridge reamer, cylinder liner puller, cylinder reboring bar, cylinder deglazer, piston knuckling tools, piston ring expander, piston ring compressor, piston ring groove cleaning machine, piston and rod aligning tools, screwdrivers, pliers, hammer, stud removers, injection nozzle remover tools. Next. So gauge tools, filler gauge to use to gauge the clearance of the piston rings, and depth gauge used for the bore to gauge the yang depth, dial gauge, limit gauge, height gauge, hole gauge, radius, and fillet gauge. Measuring tools are steel scale, micrometers, calipers, slide calipers, hook, rule, dividers, and trommels. Next. So precautions while doing piston overhaul. Next. So before commencing the overhaul, so shut off the starting air and lock it off. Open the indicator cocks. Cool down the engine sufficiently to allow lubricating oil pumps to be shut down. Isolate fuel and cooling water. Work discussion is important. Toolbox meeting must be carried out to ensure that all participants read manuals, familiar with the procedures while doing piston overhauling, and ensure that each person knows his task. So it is important to everyone to know his task so that we can prevent accident. So confirm required spares are on board. Check the lifting tools, straps, shockless, etc. are within certification and in good order. Next. Check that jacks are in good condition with no leaks. Ensure permission for immobilization is given. carry out risk assessment, ventilate crankcase, and obtain permit to ensure that no one else is working elsewhere on the engine and could be potentially harmed. Next, lastly, check the no one is working in the vicinity of the shafting system and propeller. Next. So after commencing the overhaul of piston, so we need to check the all parameters if it is in exact level, like oil gauge, water cooling system niya. Next is clean the tools after using. So it is important to clean the tools to be that we use while overhauling. Clean the area after overhauling. So we need to clean the area sa mga kuan kaning mga oil nga motagas sa atong floor dapat i-clean para walay madakdak. Check the check the lubricating oil level if it is in exact amount. Check the cooling system if it is circulated well. So check the cooling system. Then lastly, check the fuel pipes and oil pipes if there is no leakage. So sa mga pipes nga mga nakataod sa makina dapat itong i-check for if there is no leakage. Thank you.
So next to report is Engine Cadet Villahermosa.
So the next topic that we're going to report is the taking crankshaft deflection for diesel engine. So this is the guide on how to take a crankshaft deflection. So this is the picture, the actual picture of the crankshaft, which is deflect. Keeping regards for the marine engine, crankshaft deflection is very necessary. It helps to determine when your engine crankshaft deflects to either positive or negative. Next slide, please. So crankshaft deflection. Firstly, how can we define crankshaft deflection? This is a measurement done on engine crankshaft by placing a dial indicator gauge across the center of the crank webs while turning the engine clockwise or counterclockwise. The dial indicator defines the condition by showing both sides vertical and horizontal points readings. Next is these readings can be compared to the manufacturer recommended limits. Using this Warcella engine as an example shown on the below, it lets you understand the point where it takes your reading. So the next slide, please. So this is the crankshaft deflection position. So turn the crankshaft in the normal running direction, except to be marked with the arrow. So this is the crank wave deflection. So as you can see in the picture, this is the operating side, which is the circle one. This is the rear side, which is in the arrow of the crankshaft. So next slide, please. So we take crankshaft deflection to make sure that the crank runs maintain proper balance. As you know, the engine crankshaft comprises of journal, crank pin, and the crank webs. These are all supported by the main bearings via journal. Therefore, as the engine runs, due to some friction between bearings and crank pin, the bearings wear out and maintain the imbalance across the length of the crankshaft. So, since the crankshaft is reciprocating, the bearings are loosened. So, where this occurs, you experience high readings which will indicate the actual position, either it is closed or either it is open. As well as I said earlier, to make this short and understandable, I would like to explain to you how to take deflection readings of your main auxiliary engine crankshaft. So next slide, please. So this is the how to take the crankshaft deflection readings. So below steps are the steps to follow to accomplish proper readings. So first, set your dial indicator to zero. You need uh, to your dial to zero. So next is open all the crankcase covers. So you need to open to dismantle all the parts. Next is engage the turning gear. Engage uh, engage. Next is switch your turning gear to manual. So kuha naman siya sa manual if it is in auto. So next, turn the engine till the crank wheel horizontal to point to enable to place dial indicator in proper point. Next, after placing the dial indicator, check to make sure it is in zero. So you need to make sure that it is in zero. I mean, set again if required. Then that the top port side or the TP, take your readings between negative 0.01 to negative 0.35 and positive 0.1 to positive 0.35 and as well as see the manufacturer recommendations. Next slide. The next is the turning back the essential point, which is B or the port side or the starboard side horizontal, depending on the which side you started. So take horizontal position reading. Turn the bottom or B. Also you need to take the readings. Next is keep turning till the starboard side horizontal or the S. Take as well a reading. And lastly, continue turning till top starboard side vertical or TS and take the final readings. So next, what are the tools that to be used? So some of the tools that used in reading the deflections of a crankshaft. So this is one of the tools that we need to use. First is the straight gauge. So what is the use of the straight gauge? So the amount of deflection of a crankshaft may be determined by the use of a strain gauge, which is simple to apply. The straight gauge is merely a dial reading inside a micrometer used to measure the variation in the distance between adjacent crank webs when the engine shaft is rotated by a bearing in the engine over. So next slide. So next part is what are the necessary precautions that should be carried prior during the after maintenance. So uh, the question is what is the main purpose of taking diesel engine crankshaft deflection? So crankshaft deflection readings are an excellent method of on determining the engine to drive alignment and main bearing wear. They should be taken in accordance with any planned maintenance system. Uh, maintenance system. So next is
No, wait lang.
it, next slide please. Next slide. So the last slide will be what are the things that you must be inspected in a crankshaft? So what the things you must be inspected in a crankshaft? So in the case of a new crankshaft, check the dimensions and run out with a previously used crankshaft. You'll also need to check for flaws or any cracks of the crankshaft. Inspecting the crankshaft before installation varies. This condition allows you to avoid problems and/or comebacks. So for the next topic, this is
So,
Engineer Vergara report.
so I'm about to discuss about replacing a leaking mechanical seal of main engine lube oil pump. So this is as you can see in the picture, you can see the as a part of mechanical seal. So how to carry out the following maintenance? Components for defects. The short answer here is this. If there are any defects, don't work around them. Get another new seal. So if there's a defect on seals or mechanical seals, you don't have to work around it, or you don't have to use it again. So as by chance you get another seal. So first clean the pump and carefully clean the seal cavity in the pump. Ensure that the area is free from dirt, corrosion, and pitting that might interfere with the stationary seat seal. And next is remove all gasket materials from casing and seal cap. And next is clean yourself. Be sure that you wash your hands after cleaning the pan and before opening up that new seal kit and before opening up. So make sure that you have a clean hands when carry out this maintenance. And even though your hands are clean, don't ever touch the mating parts of the mechanical seal with your own hands or with your bare hands. So pretend that you're a surgeon and maintain a sterile seal if ibutang na siya sa pump. So use the lubricant provided in the seal kit or a silicone based lubricant on the stationary seat or the seat ring O-ring and the rotating element. So do not use petroleum based products for seal lubricant. So ever ever and don't allow any of the lubricants to get in the mating surface of the seal. So place a small amount of lubricant behind the rotating elements to hold it in the cup during installation. To seal the stationery, use your hand with a clean rag or a paper towel or a piece of PVC pipe that is cut square and without burrs. Do not use any metal tools to install any component s- of the s- of the seat assembly. Check to make sure the stationary seat is sitting square in the casing. Next is rotate the pump shaft by hand for each step during the assembly process. Do not relax springs tension on the rotating compressed. If this happens, remove the rotating element and reset it in relaxed position. When starting a pump for the first time or at the seasonal changeover, turn the pump hand first before starting the motor. Remember, you should never run a pump dry without any water in it even for a few seconds kay mao ni siya makaguba sa pump if wa siya way water or any oil na mo kung imo na siya i-try pag-run so way unod ang pump so mao ni makaguba. So next is what are the tools and materials to be used. So one common example of the materials is pliers, ratchet seat, small impeller wrench, and torque wrench used for tightening the nuts or rubber hammer when reassemble the pump and set of flat screwdrivers, some emery cloths and sandpaper for cleaning, and silicone lubricant for any lubrications. Next is what are the necessary precautions that you should be carry prior during and after the maintenance? Precautions for mechanical seal removal. When removing the mechanical seal, it is strictly forbidden to use the hand hammer and the flat shovel to avoid damage to the seal component. If there's a mechanical seal at both ends of the pump, care care must be taken during the disassembly process to prevent from happening. For mechanical seals that have been worked, if the seal surface moves when the glance is loose, the moving ring part should be replaced and should not be retention for continued use because the original running track of the friction pair changed after loosening. The seal of the contact surface is easily destroyed. So if the sealing surface move if the glance is being loose, so you must replace it with a new one because it is easily to be it is easily to be destroyed. If the sealing element is bound by the dirt or cohesive, the condensate should be removed before the mechanical seal is removed. So before the precaution for mechanical seal installation, the installment left part first put put it on the ceiling plate. So second is then install the moving ring on the right side and the ceiling surface of the moving ring at the static ring should be clean. Reinstall the flat key and impeller, good gasket and nut. And before installation, carefully check whether the number of assembly sealing parts is sufficient, whether the components are damaged, especially the dynamic and the static rings should be sh- such as bumps, cracks, and deformation. If there is a problem, repair or replace it with a new one. So if there's a damage in your ceiling parts or components or such cracks, bumps, or deformation, you should not repair it but replace it with a new one. Or if if it is okay to repair, so if ma-repair pa, pwede ra. So check that the chamfering of the bushing or glands is appropriate. If it is does not meet the requirements, it must be trimmed. So dapat siya ikuan ni kanang gamitan ng mga lead machine ka para i-trim nimo. So next is the mechanical seal components under associated assembled contact surface must be cleaned with acetone or absolute alcohol prior to installation. It should be kept clean. It should be kept clean during the installation process, especially the moving and the static rings and auxiliary sealing components should be free of impurities and dust. Apply a layer of clean engine oil or turbine oil to the surface of the moving stationary rings. Tighten the glands should be done after the coupling is aligned. The bolts should be evenly tightened to prevent the gland section from being skewed. Check the points with a feeler gauge or special tools with an error of number or more on with error of no more than 0.05 millimeters. So that's all for our report. Thank you. So, boss, pwede na rin may call na rin, boss, screenshot para sa itong kwan.
Ang screenshot, ang screenshot.
Screenshot ha?
Naka-screenshot ako.
Sige, salamat. Para kwan, before and after, naka-screenshot ha?
Naka-screenshot ko before.
Okay na.